So you were a co-author of the book, Killing in Amish Country, Sex Betrayal and a Cold-Blooded Murder. So how did it become a Lifetime movie, and what was your involvement in making the movie?
Well, Greg Olson and I worked on this book, it's 8 or 10 years ago now, and there'd never been a book about it. And the case is very interesting. It sold very well all these years. And we were contacted by a production company. I think it's been at least 2 years that this has been in the works because, as you know, production companies buy the rights to the book and adapt the book. And so we're credited as authors and executive producers. We haven't had, our hands in it much at all, just watched it happen.
Okay. And how did you become a co-author with Greg?
Well, after a long journalism career, I started writing true crime kind of by accident. And after my first book, which is about Ted Bundy's childhood here in Washington State, um, I wrote to him because he lives across Puget Sound from me. And I was kind of introducing myself to people. And it was a time in his life when he needed, true crime is a lot of, nonfiction's a lot of work. Greg mostly writes fiction now, but nonfiction takes years. And so I think this book was 2 or 3 years. So we collaborated on that. And then actually it came after a book about Susan Powell, who's still missing in Utah, that we worked on. And pretty much I still do true crime and by myself, and he does a lot of fiction.
Okay. And how your credit is as executive producer, and he's not? How did that work?
No, he is.
Oh, he is. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't see that in the credit.
Yes.
You said it takes years. Is that because of all the interviews and gathering all the facts and making sure everybody has
it's really important to go to the site, to go to the place where the crime happens. And so I went to Ohio, to this county, a couple of times. And, I built relationships with Amish people who would talk to me, and they have pseudonyms in the book.
Sure.
And also a Mennonite woman who's a taxi driver, like Barb Raber was. And I'm still in touch with people in that community. So it just takes time to build relationships, and yes, to get the documents, to get the police report, to the prosecutor is, I'm glad to see she's has a place in the movie, and to interview a lot of people, and then decide how to tell this story.
Mm-hmm.
And what is this story? Somebody well known wrote that the crime is the end of the story, and what came before is really helps. It just plays a big part. So I kind of follow that you have to look at what community a crime occurs in, and who the people are, and what does it mean. I'll tell you, this murder has a very deep meaning for the Amish people.
I'll bet. Yeah. So did you have any say at all in the movie, or casting, or any aspect at all, or?
No, we just sort of enjoyed knowing that the process was happening, and I think that's very common, that
Sure.
movies, authors are not on the set.
No, I know.
And are not really consulted, and of course, Lifetime bought the rights to do with it what they will. But I just saw it yesterday, and I was really impressed with how the script works in the facts about the Amish that people may not know.
Yeah.
We have this idea of tourism really picked up in Ohio after Witness with Harrison Ford in 1985, the movie,
Sure.
which was a love story and everything, and suddenly people flocked to Amish country, and it's a little bit different than that, and but I just had to learn you know, as much as you can from the outside, because I was
Right.
definitely an outsider, you know, who are these people, and what are their lives like, and be able to approach it with dignity and respect, because it's not a community that I belong to,
Mhm.
but you know, I'm an observer, and
Yeah, I learned many things watching this movie. I guess I always thought they were more self-contained. The fact that some of them would get a phone, and some of them would
yeah.
uh go to the store or take a cab. I didn't even know they did that. I thought they
Yes,
grew all their own food, and why would they go buy milk and eggs? I thought
right.
they had their own.
Well, and that's what was at the time of this story. I mean, what really prompted this murder was lifestyle changes for the Amish.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have happened if Barb Raber hadn't given Eli a cell phone.
Hmm.
You know, the whole murder was planned
Right.
on the cell phones. And if they had waited one more day to try to get the phone records, you know, the police wouldn't have had the phone records. But life had been changing there for a while. It used to be all Amish farmed, and now maybe half the Amish work for the English, the non-Amish,
Mhm.
in factories or
Hmm.
stores that are nearby. There are different, not sects, but different groups within the Amish
Mhm.
and they differ in how religious they are, or what kinds of principles they adhere to.
Well, that makes sense.
Eli was one of the strictest, actually, Andy
Wow.
Weaver Amish. And you can tell as you drive the roads of Ohio, as I did, you can tell what group of Amish they belong to by
Huh.
what color their house is,
Wow.
and if they have any outdoor lighting. Most do. You know, it's fascinating to drive that area because, of course, there are no power lines.
Right.
Most Amish, they do not have phones. They do not have television sets. You don't, it's so
Sure.
quiet. It is
Yeah, I
so quiet.
bet.
Yeah. But also, like Eli's group, the Andy Weaver Amish, they don't believe in linoleum in the house.
Huh.
And I really can't explain that, except that's one of the ways that some Amish differ.
Huh.
They do have, is portrayed in the movie, there's this shanty or kind of outhouse looking building that has a phone that the neighbors can share in case of an emergency.
Yeah.
And it was a neighbor who called in the murder to the police.
Well, that's good. Um, yeah, I liked the beginning where the detective says it's not a cult. I'm thinking it's
Yeah, it's
not.
not a cult, it's a religion.
Like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. And I'm
the
really
difference
glad.
between a cult and a religion is not always so clear.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that the movie works in that kind of fact,
Mhm.
and Rumspringa, you know, when
Yeah.
teenagers are a little have freedom and decide whether they're going to uh, you know, be Amish and stay Amish. And
Right.
that's the thing that the Amish fled from in Europe,
Mm.
you know, over the years, is they believe in delaying baptism until somebody can make up their own mind,
Oh,
and
interesting.
that's what they were persecuted for
Hmm.
in Europe.
Like that's a new thing I learned now. So that's good. And so did they invite you to the set at all? Were you able to go see any of the shooting?
No, I wish I could say more about
That's
being
okay.
there. I don't think I think it was filmed in Canada by looking at the
Probably.
credits. That's what I thought.
I
But
think most of their
no, we
movies
were
are, yeah.
just, I sat here in Seattle working on, of course, I've done a number of books since this one, and so is
Sure.
Greg. But there's something, you know, to me, every book is special and every story is special.
Sure.
And the fact that I've stayed in touch, and, you know, a woman, a Mennonite who's a driver like Barb Raber was, you know, I met her in person and she's on Facebook. And so, you know, Mennonites have a much more open life. You know,
Right.
they have churches. The Amish don't have churches,
Hmm.
buildings. You know, they meet in their barns,
Right.
and so she can own a car and drive a car and drives people around. Amish can ride in a car, but can't own one or
Okay.
drive one.
And were you familiar with any of the cast before you saw the movie?
Oh, definitely Luke.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, who isn't?
Quite different role for him.
Yes, and I have a lot of friends here who are anxious and follow him, follow his career. And I'm embarrassed to say that the name of the woman who plays Barb Raber, who had a long TV
Hmm.
history with crime shows, I think she is amazing.
She is. She's
I
pretty good.
Yes, remind me of her name.
Kristen Van. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name.
Yes,
Magnus,
I
something like
thought, well, I thought they were
from
all really
Criminal
good and
Minds
very,
is the show
yes,
she was
Criminal
on.
Minds. Wow. I just really thought she had a great performance
Yes.
because, she's being manipulated and
Yeah.
taken
Yeah.
advantage of. She's, a mother herself. When she was convicted, her three sons were left behind, and their father died a year or two after she
Um,
went to prison. And that's something that still really touches me, is how many children were affected by this murder,
sure.
because Eli
Sure.
and Barbara had five. Now, in the movie, they have two children, but they had five children under the age of 9.
Wow.
And then Barb Raber had three children. And there were some cousins in the house the night of the murder of the Weavers' cousins. So there were children, other children there. And just what a terrible lesson for these young Amish children.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No kidding. So did the person who wrote the script, did they get in touch with you at all? Or
No,
no?
no,
Okay.
we
But they did
really
a good
didn't
job
have.
anyway, so that's good.
Yes, they did. They followed. They really followed the book. And there's a lot more, and I encourage people to read the book now after
Yeah.
they've seen the movie, to find out all the details. And they did, the movie represents Eli leaving his home and dating women, and he
Mhm.
fathered a child with one of the
Wow.
women that
Wow.
is
That's not too
depicted in the
surprising though,
movie.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's true. It's in the movie that every time he gave movie money to a girlfriend, he was withholding money
Mm.
from Barbara.
Right.
And she kept a journal,
Yeah.
and the movie shows her speaking to a therapist, and that
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's true. That's absolutely
So
real.
how long ago did
Until
all this happen, in the early part of the century?
oh no, this is two well, the shooting was 2009.
Right. Oh, okay.
And the case kind of evolved in 2009, 2010. And there is an agency in Ohio where the Amish can go, which is amazing. They can go and talk to a counselor like she
Oh, that's
did.
good.
And Eli, when he found out, forbade her from going, but she continued to write letters to this therapist, and the therapist would mail his letters to her sister so
Ah,
she could receive them. Um, but a whole nother part of this, Suzanne, that I still think about a lot, is this was definitely domestic violence, and
oh yeah.
and the Amish is it's a closed society, and one of the problems with a closed society is, who are you going to talk to about problems, with your husband? And um, and I think it's pretty clear in the movie, and this is true. She was told, "Well, what are you doing that your husband treats you like that?
Yeah.
And you need to be a better wife." And we know that's not what domestic violence is about. Um, I'm told that it's life has changed a little bit, and that
Okay.
I mean, one of the people I know there said that they saw a bishop helping a woman or children leave the house that she needed to leave, in the last couple of
Good.
years.
Good.
So maybe they're paying attention. But somebody, I think it's her sister at the funeral, or a friend, says, we should have told her she could leave. We should have listened to her
Yeah.
and helped her leave. And at that point, that just wasn't done.
Yeah. I think that's why I think of it as a cult, because I've been reading a lot lately about Scientology, and they do
Oh,
similar things with women. They,
Oh,
you know, they put all
yes.
the thing on the women, all the responsibility
Yeah.
on women.
Well, I think it'll be interesting for you to compare this to occult to Scientology. I've also done a book that took me deep into Mormonism because
Mhm.
Susan Powell is missing in Utah, and again, I'm an observer, but it was fascinating to me how much these two books had in common.
Mm.
That the church discouraged um, women leaving. They discouraged women from talking about what was going on in the house, and the both women died, were murdered
Yeah.
when they didn't leave.
Did they do it? Did that sounds very familiar? Was this also a Lifetime movie?
It wasn't a Lifetime movie, but I've done a lot of there have been a lot of documentaries and true crime
Oh,
TV
okay. It
shows
must be a
about Susan
different
Powell.
Mormon family where the woman was very famous.
Yeah, and then the husband later kills the kids and himself when
Oh,
he's
man.
fighting for custody of their sons back here in Washington State. So that goes on and on and on. And I'm writing a second book actually about
Oh,
that
okay,
case right
great.
now.
So
Her
yeah, this,
parents, sued the state of Washington because the boys were murdered
uh,
during a visitation with their father, and they successfully sued. So the state of Washington was held liable
yeah,
for this 5 and 7 year old
wow.
murders. And
That's yeah, these things are so sad. That's the only problem with
oh,
these kind
oh,
of movies is it's just,
yeah,
especially when
yeah,
they're based on a true story. It's like, oh, but
yeah.
I
They're
feel it's
not
really
very
sad that
lighthearted.
Barb got more time than he did.
Yes, isn't that interesting? Well, he took the plea
Yeah.
deal, and agreed to testify against her, so he could be out on parole next year. And I've been following his status to see what happens, but he could. I don't know what to think. I doubt if he would be paroled that soon. And she has, I think, another 10 years to serve. I don't think either one would be welcome back in their
Yeah.
community.
I would
They're
think,
not going to be embraced. And
yeah.
I think, the Amish are famous for their forgiveness, but I don't think he's
I
going to
would
be
hope not,
forgiven
yeah.
and
So now I
taken
haven't
back.
read your book, but there was one thing that was mentioned a few times in the movie, which and I hope this doesn't bother you. He wanted his wife to perform oral sex. Is that something that is frowned on in the Amish community, or was it just her personal thing?
Well, that's hard to say because um, we know that she found it disturbing.
Hmm.
And you notice they use the word submission a lot
Hmm.
in the show.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the wifely duties to submit. But she was frank about that with her therapist and in her journal, that she thought, that oral sex was not lovemaking,
Hmm.
didn't have anything to do
So it was
with
more
that.
her than the
So I think it was
church.
more, I don't think she ever probably talked about that. Well, I think she talks with a friend once in the movie, or her sister, about what what is really expected
Right, right,
of wives, or of, if you're married to Eli,
right.
there's an awful lot expected. I think it was just that she wasn't prepared for it, and maybe it's not common.
From what I read, they don't get a lot of sex education, so that's not
No,
too
no,
surprising.
they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the scene where she and her sister are reading romance novels and books, because that was true. That was, I talked to a woman who grew up with Barbara Weaver, and that's what they did as teenagers, is they giggle and laugh and read romance novels, and that was really what her teenage years. It was, very, very innocent
Right.
and very sweet.
So I also read a few online accounts about there being a lot of rape and other abuse of Amish women by their families. Is any of that in your book, or did you find out about any of that in your research?
I never heard that.
Hmm.
I know there was another murder years before of a man and his wife, but murder is very, very rare among
Hmm.
the Amish, and I know that's not what you're asking about, but I never ever heard, and
That's
I
good.
talked to a lot of academics who study the Amish, and there are lots of interesting books and documentaries about it. I never heard that rape was common.
That's good.
I just never heard that.
Right, right. Okay, well, is there anything else you can tell us about your book or about the movie, that anything you'd like to share?
Um, well, again, it's this this murder happened right as life was changing for the Amish, and
Mhm,
that's why it happened in 2009. You
mhm.
know, Eli, if he'd wanted to have affairs, 10 or 20 years ago, that would have been difficult. But he had a cell phone, he could go to the chat rooms. The title of the movie is Amish Stud. That was his online moniker.
Right.
There's a photo of him naked from the waist up that he put online. And there were women who were very, interested and attracted to that. But it also came when life is changing for the Amish, when there are fewer farms. A group of Amish from Ohio moved to Colorado a couple of years ago to find land, because there's just no more land to farm in that area of Ohio. And people working away from the farm, taking a lunch bucket to a factory to work, that kind of, life has changed a lot for the Amish, and just in the last half of the 20th century. So it was ripe for something to happen, and that was when Eli came along.
So you think if they'd continued to be a more insular community, that would make it better? He wouldn't have happened, or if they had, or if it was more like now where there was more open?
Well, I think they will discover and are discovering what's working and what doesn't. One of my an Amish man that I became really good friends with, he told me he and his family had two teenagers and a wife, and the highlight of their week was they ordered pizza delivered. And that is interesting. So life it's changed in good ways. It's a very egalitarian society. Women drive the buggies also, and work really hard. It is men who work off the farm, but it's a lot of work, because remember, they're washing everything by hand,
Yeah.
and no appliances, none. If you're a fairly strict Amish person, and I've seen photographs of Amish teenagers going down the road on roller skates or cycles. And so, I think life is continuing to change for them.
Good.
And yet many of them remain committed to the community
Mhm.
that they have.
All right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your talking to us today,
Thank you, Suzanne.
and good luck with your next book.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Good talking to you.
You too.